I have been putting off making this video for a couple days now because I fear that it might become long. But let's just do it. This is gonna be my album review for GFRIEND's second album, Time for Us. I've already reacted to the Sunrise music video and to two live performances of Sunrise on this channel. And now what I'm going to do is just go through the album. I have listened to the album 3 times. The first time I took some notes, and I'm gonna essentially go through those notes for the review now. And I'm gonna go song for song, and then in the end I'm gonna give my ultimate opinion of the album. But okay, spoiler warning, I liked it. Let's just get started, and let's just start with the first song. And the first song, Sunrise, not the title track, but the lead promo track, the single. Now, if you've watched my reactions to the music video and to the live performances, you already know I love this song. I think Sunrise is absolutely stunning, and having the album open with it is, of course, a perfect choice. It has such a deceptively simple intro, and then it just breaks into this sugary, upbeat, sweet, fun, beautiful K-pop track. But when usually these happy, upbeat, sweet songs would typically be all electronic for most K-pop acts, for GFRIEND instead it's just almost all organic instruments. You have piano chords instead of synths. You have strings to fill out the tremolo. You have those really warm strings in the chorus as the melody just ascends higher and higher and higher, those layered vocal melodies. It really uses a full range, both for the vocals and for the background instrumental. The background instrumental has the piano, has the strings, has the guitar really going up and down, has some high-pitched violins, has some, I think there's some cello in the background as well, really fills out the entire space. Then you have the vocals as well, going from the mid-ranges to some medium-high belts, to some beautiful, gorgeous head voice that is really well connected to the rest of the notes. It's just really, really full, and the notes are also not always on the most obvious beat. In a lot of pop songs, you will have like a 4 out of 4 time signature. It will be like duh, 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 duh. And the instruments will just play on all of those beats. And that is very boring, that is very standard, that is very uninspired. But GFRIEND doesn't necessarily do that. There were some sounds here, some instruments that were playing on the off notes, or were holding out the notes longer than you would typically expect. They weren't just playing fourths and eighths, they were playing more interesting melodic structures. And that really sets them apart from a lot of other K-pop groups. Sunrise is a very good example of a much more complex and unusual composition than you usually find in pop music. And then, of course, it's supported by that gorgeous arrangement and wonderful production. The last chorus is just a beautiful culmination of everything coming together in the song. And it just works so perfectly, and the vocals blend perfectly. And there's even a very nice little call and response thing going on between the vocals and the instruments in some points, where will essentially be a back and forth, where the vocals will briefly remain in the center of attention, then the instruments will, and it's a beautiful back and forth, and that is really something to appreciate. Sunrise is just such a stunning and beautiful and fun and affirming song, and it's really, they went all out with the first song, and I would say it's probably the best thing on this album as well. And it's just such a fantastic song and the perfect choice to open the album with. And it's just, oh my god, Sunrise is just so, so good. It is just such a good song. And it's so organic, that is really what I like about it. And that applies to a lot of their music. It's real instruments. It's strings, it's guitar, it's piano. It just has so much texture to it that primarily or completely electronic music often lacks. And I'm so happy about that, because especially in K-pop is so electronic driven. And there's nothing wrong with that. I like electronic music. But it's just refreshing to have one K-pop group that really stands out for how organic and acoustic their production is. Okay, next up we get into You Are Not Alone, the second song. And that has a very similar interplay of these very authentic acoustic sounds, but has something electronic coming in. Now, Sunrise sounded like an electronic pop song that was using acoustic instruments instead. This actually uses these electronic sounds as well. There's this nice synth that I really like, a very clean beeping synth. That's the only way I can explain what it sounds like. That plays a melody that is very sweet, but at the same time very dark. And then there's other synths and guitar coming in that just accentuate that so nicely. And it plays off against the girl's vocals very, very well. There's a really great moment here that is something that I generally like when songs do it. As the second verse starts, the song builds all the way down, slows to a crawl, and then just rebuilds again. And I really like that. I really like when a song just strips everything off and starts over again, essentially from the second verse. And sorry, I just had to click remind me later on a Windows update. And this song does it. A lot of songs do it, but I always like hearing it because it really lets them introduce all the elements individually, so you can really pay attention to the individual elements. And this song does that very well in the second verse. Ultimately, this song is much more electronic, but it still feels sweeping and orchestral. And that is something quite special, not everyone can do that. There's a certain amount of warmth to the arrangement and production here, and that is something special. I did think that towards the end of the song, when you get to the last chorus, the mix did get a bit messy, and there were just a lot of different melodies in the treble area, a lot of high-pitched melodies, vocal melodies, and instrumental melodies. They were kind of all working against each other rather than working together, I felt. But it's still a very good song. It's just towards the end, I felt the mix got a bit too overstuffed. I feel like you could have probably taken out a couple of those vocal lines or a couple of those instrumental lines, and it would have been a bit more powerful, it would have been a bit more clear. But as a whole, it's a very nice song, and I like how it transitions from Sunrise, which was almost entirely acoustic and orchestral, into a more electronic sound while still retaining that grand, sweeping, beautiful, quiet, and very organic feeling. Next up, we get to LUV, and that one I still enjoyed, but I didn't love. My biggest issue here was the vocal production and the processing on the vocals. I felt it was all a bit too much, and it just wasn't sonically very nice for me. But as a whole, the song still did some nice things, and I was very surprised when the beat drop happened, when it moved pretty much into hip-hop almost. And then it had a very jazzy guitar that I think the first two songs both also had guitar, but they didn't have that jazz, that funk guitar that this one had. But ultimately, even though this has a beat drop, even though this has hip-hop elements, even though this has a different style of guitar, it still ties into the rest of the album surprisingly well because it has those high-pitched synths in it. And those are elements that you also see in the song before and in a lot of songs that happen later on. Now, I did think the chorus didn't really work with the rest of the song, with the rapped verse. There's no problem with having rapped verses and sung choruses, but in this particular case, they just felt like they belonged to different songs, and I didn't really feel like they connected well. I feel like that didn't really work. Ultimately, I felt the song was just a bit chaotic. And like it was just jumping back and forth and didn't really know what it was going for. And then you get to the bridge, and there was suddenly some 80s style synths in there, which also something I really like, but felt a bit out of place in the song. So LUV, still, I was happy with the risks it took, with how it introduced new elements, with the guitar, with the hip-hop elements, with the beat drop, and they managed to tie it into the rest of the album surprisingly well, despite it being such a different sound, such a different style. But ultimately, I felt that song was a bit too chaotic, a bit all over the place, and it didn't really do much for me. But it instantly gets a lot more interesting for me because we continue into Glow. And Glow is just, it is exactly what you expect a song with that title to sound like, and I love it. It has a tiny bit of disco in it. It continues that jazzy, funky guitar that we got a bit of in LUV, but it goes stronger with it. It goes more all out. Of course, you can't have disco without having funk. Those are related genres. And here you have the funk guitar with a disco sound. Not a strong disco sound, but it's there. And it's just such a perfect fit for the title. It has an absolutely fantastic build-up in the pre-chorus, where it has those very full synth chords, and they really let them breathe. They really let them play out. A lot of times when you have synth chords, it's very staccato. It's very do do do, and they are cut off early. But these really get to be drawn out and get to fill the soundscape, and that is beautiful. It really provides a really, really good basis, a really good foundation for the vocals to be laid on top. It's a very full, very engaging, very enveloping sound. You feel like it's all around you, and that is wonderful. The chorus has some of those same beeping synths that I think it was You Are... What is the song called? Yes, I think it was You Are Not Alone that also had those. So it ties them together sonically. It has some of the same elements. I like that. It means the album was actually designed to be an album. But the chorus has those same beeping tremolo synths, and for a moment it almost feels like they're straight out of a chiptune or 8-bit song. And that adds another unique element. So far, this album has been very sonically consistent. You can tell that this is all the same group, that these songs belong together, but every song has introduced some other subgenre, some other element, and it has worked out very, very well. And then in the second verse, there's once again more stuff going into the mix. It just goes the extra step, goes complex, but not messy. It's all very deliberate, and I really like that. Then in the bridge, you just have wonderful synths again that they feel almost a bit apocalyptic, and I love that, but it's still beautiful. It's not a fear of the apocalypse, it's an embracing it, and I love that. It's beautiful. And then you got claps, and if you've been watching my reactions for a while, you know I always point out claps, because for some reason I always like them. There's such a simple way to provide a beat without going for a drum kit, or a drum machine, or going for a basic synth beat. It has a very, claps have a very organic sound, they're very unobtrusive, and it feels very spontaneous. And it worked here very well as well. So Glow, much more into Glow than into LUV. Very interesting to see them go just the tiniest bit into disco, have all those synths, all those guitars, and just a very full, beautiful, engaging mix. So that, very, very good. And then we continue on to Our Secret, and once again, something surprising here, because this one actually sounds a lot like current American and European hit songs. But then, to make it their own, that guitar stands out. That guitar is not something you will hear currently in the US top 10. So once again, they're taking something from another genre here. They're taking contemporary American pop, but they're adding something else to make it theirs, to fit it into their soundscape. And once again, it's just a fantastic production where there was one very little detail that I really liked. There was this quick little beat that just moved from ear to ear, and it really gave it texture, it really gave it three-dimensionality. And of course, when music is recorded in stereo, a lot of sound engineers don't really seem to care, but there is so much you can do with stereo sound. You can really make someone feel like they're in the room with the music, like they're being engaged by the music around them. And little details like that, if a song doesn't have them, you're not going to notice that they're missing. But when they're there, you really appreciate them, and this song has that. In general, it's just top-notch dance pop production. This doesn't really have the organic orchestral sound that they go for in a lot of the other stuff, but it still very much feels like GFRIEND, and it works in the context of the album. I think at the end, something they did perfectly was a lot of vocal reverb that was used for effect. And it really helped for the conclusion. It really helped build up the sound bigger and bigger and bigger towards the end. Once again, it was like hitting a wall of sound, but this time it was not one that was the basis, but one that was the end, one that stopped you. And it was just wonderful. One thing that I did notice, it reminded me a lot of another K-pop song, and that is Shattered by Boa, which is also a fantastic song. The chorus and pre-chorus melody, they were very, very similar, and the mix is also pretty close. So I wonder if there might have been some of the same writers involved, or if there might have been some deliberate influence there, since Boa is, of course, super influential, super well-known, is the queen of K-pop, pretty much, or at least the princess of K-pop. So I thought that similarity was interesting. I'm not trying to say they ripped off Boa or anything. I'm just saying they're stylistically similar, and the chorus reminded me of that song. But that is also a very good song, so that is a good thing to remind me of. Now, once we get into Only One, and now we're about halfway through the album already. I guess this. Oh my god, I'm 15 minutes into this video. Okay, this is gonna be a long one. I'm gonna try to be a bit faster, but I do want to give every song the proper attention that they require. I feel that's the fairest way to really do a review. You have to really go into detail. Next up, Only One, and here there's a slight influence that I detected that was surprising. And that once again continues this trend of every song having just a slight different genre moving in. And that is in the melody, not necessarily in the instrumental. I found a bit of a Latin pop influence. I don't know if you guys also heard that. Maybe I'm just imagining it. But I feel like that is very much... there's a slight Latin pop trend in K-pop right now. And I feel they might be just dipping their toes into it really slightly. Because instrumentally, it's not really a Latin pop song. Instrumentally, it's an R&B song. But that melody and that rhythm definitely screams Latin pop to me. Very quietly. It's a very quiet scream, but I can hear it screaming Latin pop. Now, there's some other good stuff going on here. It feels a lot like 90s American girl group and boy group pop, which also had that mix of Latin pop influences and R&B going on. There was a lot of the underlying music for that era of essentially teen and idol pop. And here it's very nicely drawn out with those full fuzzy synth chords that some previous songs also already had. Once again, tying it into the rest of the album, you have some recurring sounds here. The genres are different. The songs are different, but there's some recurring elements, recurring sounds, recurring instruments that really link it all together. But it's just very, very nicely produced. I think my favorite part here was the vocal production, actually. There were some cut-up, scattered vocals that were used in the chorus, and they add some modernity, because while it does sound like a 90s American teen pop song, it has those more modern production elements, those scattered, cut-up vocals. And that turns it once again into their own thing. And here also, in the second verse, which is another thing we see a lot on this album, the second verse usually has something interesting going on. In the second verse, you just have a very deliberate, detailed arrangement and mix, and it just shines. And what else is there to say about the song? The vocals were very nice here. Some very nice bells, some very nice head voice ad-libs, or ad-nibs, people use different terms, towards the end of the song. And another surprising element here was that the outro was characterized by a guitar solo. And once again ties it into the other songs that also use guitar in similar supporting ways. And it's just something that I didn't expect, and I always like the unexpected. I dislike nothing more in music than predictability. I don't like knowing exactly what something is going to sound like. So whenever something can surprise me in a song, whether it's the production, the arrangement, where the melody is going, I'm always a fan of that. I would rather have something interesting and unique that's not that good over something that is very generic, very predictable, but good at it. I prefer creativity over technical execution. But here you have both. It's the song is just creative enough to be interesting, to set itself apart, but also has that excellent technical execution, wonderful arrangement, wonderful production, very good vocals. Just an altogether very nice song, Only One. Now we get to Truly Love, and this is just, I just have to be serious. I made a pledge when I started this channel that I wouldn't lie, that I wouldn't exaggerate, that I'd be honest. And honestly, Truly Love did not do it for me. That is not a song I enjoyed. It was just too sugary sweet for me. Once again, I'm not trying to give some objective opinion here. This is some objective statement here. This is my personal opinion. The song is just not my style. Not necessarily saying it's a bad song, just that I do not like it. But I did find some things to appreciate here, and those were, for starters, the vocal production. There were some interesting things that they did with vocal processing, with vocal effects that weren't very in your face, but if you pay attention, they're there. And that's very nice. That was very subtle. That's a subtle production moment. I like that. It didn't hit you over the head with the effect, but it's there. And it fills out the sound nicely. And I was also a bit surprised by just how modern EDM the chorus goes. Now, we had at least one other song on this album already that sounded like modern American pop. But here it really goes all out for the chorus, and it does feel a bit disconnected from the rest of both the song and the album, I feel. It doesn't really have that lightness. It is a bit more generic, or at least the melody and production felt a bit more generic to me, ultimately just less unique than the rest of the album. But very much not a bad song, just not my personal thing. It just didn't really do it for me, and it also stands out from the album a bit. I don't think it fits in as well as a lot of the other songs do. I don't think it really establishes that same continuity to the other songs that we've seen so far in the album. It just stands out from the tracklist to me. But then we continue on and we get something a lot more interesting, and something I'm also a bit conflicted about, but Show Up, which is the next song, has just the most wonderful intro. It's just full and energetic, and it has synths that are very tightly cut off again, and it feels very pressing. It really moves you forward. It really takes your attention and runs with it. And it has that full spectrum of sound again. The jazzy guitar is back, there are claps, there's just a tiny bit of brass that might be synth brass, I'm not quite sure, but it definitely sounded interesting. Then it has a house piano. I'm talking about house, the electronic music genre here, where it has a very typical house chord progression, but it works because they don't have that in any of the other songs here. And I always feel that a house chord progression is really well suited for a song that really builds up to a big chorus. And that is where the song loses me a bit. Because while I think the build-up is spectacular, it kind of falls apart in the chorus for me, because the chorus is very much like Truly Love for me. It's not bad, but it's a very generic K-pop cute happy chorus. And there's nothing wrong with generic, nothing wrong with cute, nothing wrong with happy. It just, in this particular song, it doesn't really work for me. Nonetheless, very nice vocals here, very soft vocals. That's a different vocal quality from what we've seen in some of the other songs. And it's just the production, at least in the lead up to the chorus, is just fantastic. It really makes you feel like you're free falling and experiencing the air go by you, or like you're underwater and it just surrounds you. It's a very nice build up. I just feel like the chorus didn't really deliver on that promise. Okay, we're getting towards the end spot of the album. Next up, It's You. Now, this one I liked a bit more again. It has a very soft synth build-up with a lot of reverb that slowly increases in pitch, and that works very well. That's a very, very nice intro. Altogether, it's a much more deliberate, detailed production again, where it has some high-pitched synth melodies and a background drum machine. And I thought that was memorable, that was filling out the soundscape well. And something I criticize a lot of K-pop for, I think I mentioned it earlier in this review briefly, it's just that a lot of songs are very tremolo heavy and kind of forget about the bass, or are very bass heavy and kind of forget about the tremolo. It's often very one-sided, but so far this album has been very good about filling out the sound, really using the full spectrum, both for the vocals and for the background instrument. And this is yet another example of that, where the drum machine is filling out the lower and mid-tones, and then you have that high-pitched synth melody really filling out the tremolo, and that works very, very nicely. Now, this once again, I detected some Latin pop influences, and this time not only in the melody, but also in how the guitar was being used. And once again, there's a lot of R&B in here, very classic R&B, very relaxed mid-tempo, classic R&B that is very, very nice, very, very pretty, very, very gorgeous. Once again, the guitar has been used very effectively here. It really emphasizes different things in the mix in different points. It is pretty much used as like an arrow. Pay attention to this, pay attention to this. Very good use of your guitar. And melody-wise, this is one of the prettiest songs on the album. The vocal melodies are just wonderful. And the girls get to shine with their vocals here as well, because there are a lot of transitions between different vocal registers here. You have a lot of chest voice to head voice transitions here, and they're very smooth, they're very clean, and that is something that a lot of singers struggle with, but here it works out very well. Now, sometimes the head voice was a bit thin, not just from one member, I think, but from multiple. But it still worked very well here. It's a very gentle song, so the head voice doesn't have to be particularly powerful. Ultimately, it's just a very sweet, very pretty, very engaging song, and I enjoyed it quite a lot. So It's You, another good song. Now, next up, we have a low-tempo R&B track, and this one almost feels like the finale of the album, but it's not quite the finale yet. It's called Starry Sky, and it's a very organic, very sweet, down-tempo R&B song. It uses many of the same instruments that we've seen in the album before, but the piano this time around feels very cold. I think it might be equalized a bit differently from how it was equalized in a lot of the other songs here. And it really contrasts with the warmth that a lot of the rest of the song has. I did feel, and this is becoming a bit of a common criticism here. I think this is the third song where I'm pointing out something like this. I did feel like the chorus was a bit out of place here again. Not as out of place as on some of the other songs, but it did take me out of it a bit. It did feel like it wasn't quite connected to the rest of the song, just tonally a bit inconsistent, but not so much that it ruined the song for me at all. It just goes a bit too big too quickly for my taste here. But the rest of the song, the verses, very, very nice and very relaxing, almost hypnotic, and I very much enjoyed that. There was a drum machine here again, and for once I didn't quite enjoy how it was integrated into the mix. It made the otherwise very organic, very beautiful acoustic track feel a bit too mechanical. But then again, the cold piano also kind of felt mechanical, so that might have been what they were going for here a bit, to really show off that dichotomy between the warmth of their vocals and the warmth of the acoustic instruments, and then that cold piano, that cold drum machine. But honestly, I'm just not sure if it's deliberate here or if that's just more or less an accident. But this kind of feels like it should have been the album outro. But we do get one more song, and then we get a Korean version of a previously released song and an instrumental version. I kind of count those as bonus tracks. I know they're not officially bonus tracks, but they feel like bonus tracks. So for me, the real finale of the album is this song, Love Oh Love. Now this one probably surprised me the most on initial listen here, because it kind of breaks the flow of the rest of the album. And that's why I'm saying that A Starry Sky feels like the real finale to me. This one is just early 2000s K-pop, just straight up, just all out early 2000s K-pop. And it doesn't quite feel like a GFRIEND song in these, or at least in the context of this album, it doesn't quite feel like it belongs, which isn't to say that it's a bad song. It does flow surprisingly okay, despite feeling a bit out of place, because the introduction works well to make the flow happen. But then it's a lot rougher and heavier than the rest of the album, and I can see why it was placed as the album closer, because it really gives you a different perspective. It kind of wakes you up. It does have that same like weepy synth that was everywhere a couple of years ago, but that doesn't really turn up on this album elsewhere, and it is very catchy. But I'm just kind of taken out of the rest of the album. I feel like A Starry Sky would have been the perfect closer, and then Love Oh Love just comes in and just swoops in, and it's a very different style. But it's not a bad song, and there are some nice things here. There's a nice piano here that very much deconstructs chords rather than play them just one by one, and that kind of makes the song their own a bit, because that does feel like GFRIEND. But it's a minor element in the context of this song. It's just very unexpected, and then it has a breakdown that kind of sounds like the 90s American Idol pop again, so that does kind of feel connected to the album, but this song is just one step too far removed from the rest of the album for me sonically, and I don't really think like it flows quite good enough to make such a different sound work. But individually, if I just listen to this song, I like it. It just, in the album context, it doesn't really feel right to me. Okay, those were all the actual original new songs on this album, and so far I think it was clear that I enjoyed this album. I did have some criticisms, but ultimately I did very much enjoy this album. Now next up, we get to two songs that I don't really count as being part of this, because in my opinion, just recording a different language version of an already released song and adding it onto an album, that doesn't count as original material to me. And it's clear that song wasn't created specifically for the album. It doesn't really work as part of the overall art piece album to me. So next up we have Memoria, and that was originally a Japanese song, and wow, it shows. Because this is very J-pop. Now, it's a very sweet song. You can instantly tell this was a single, because they are bringing their A game. And this is my favorite song next to Sunrise. So I am glad it was included. I just see it as more of a bonus song, because it clearly wasn't created along with the other songs. It wasn't created to be part of this album's emotional arc. It was tacked on because they had this song already from their Japanese discography and they could record an English version of it. But I'm happy they did because it's a fantastic song. It has this full warm arrangement. It has much more aggressive vocals. They're really forward, they're really pushing. And it's just, you can tell the song was created to be played on the radio to get people's attention. This was created for live performances to really get the audience going. It still has that regality that a lot of the stuff has. It still has that orchestral, grand, sweeping sound. But this is very much a song for the anime crowd. Like, this is anisong. If you don't know what anisong is, or anison, sometimes it's, if you use the Japanese version of the term, it's without the G at the end. It's essentially music that is created for or in the context of anime, that often has a very power pop influence, has a very grand, sweeping, majestic melody, very big melody, very sweeping full arrangement, often has guitar, synths, piano, and strings. And this just all out feels like an anisong track. This feels like something that an anisong artist would release, and that is not a problem at all. I love that. I've been a fan of that genre for a long time. It has a really great pre-chorus that's very, very upbeat, just set against strings, and it's fantastic. Then in the chorus, it has a violin, and that is just all out anisong. That is what you get in a Nana Mizuki song, and it's wonderful. It's just a very full, engaging mix, a very energetic melody, a very beautiful, huge sound. This is the kind of song that you send to people to introduce them to this group and to really turn them into instant fans, because it's a wonderful song. But it's just so J-pop. It is so J-pop. Even the little English bits just feel so J-pop in how they are mixed and integrated. But ultimately, it's just a very powerful song. It shows some diversity here. This album was already rather diverse because while it was sonically consistent, while it was clearly all cut from the same cloth, every single song brought in some other elements. But this song just goes straight up all out J-pop. And it doesn't feel like it's part of the album. It doesn't feel like it belongs on the album. But I'm so happy they added it on at the end because it's such a good, strong song. Okay, and then last up, we still got the instrumental version of Sunrise. Once again, this is something that I consider more a bonus track, even if it's officially part of the track list. This song, it does have a very pretty arrangement, but it is the kind of song that I feel doesn't really stand on its own without the vocals. So listening to the instrumental, I appreciated that I was able to really hear more details here that I wasn't able to clearly hear from the standard version. But listening to it by itself, it doesn't have the same power, doesn't have the same beauty. This really needs the vocal melodies. I was able to hear some nice guitar production details here, though, that I wasn't able to hear originally. Okay, now that we've talked about every individual song, let's talk about the album as a whole. And I've kind of already done that in this review, but let's just get back to it. I very much enjoyed how they went for their own sound, their own aesthetic here that sets them apart from the rest of the K-pop world. They are really going for this organic, sweeping, beautiful, authentic sound here. And it works wonderfully. And throughout this album, you have, for the biggest part, you have a flow that works very well. You have songs that always, that have a similar bass line, but that add, their own unique individual elements, often taken from different music genres for the different songs. So it's not a boring album. These songs don't sound the same, which is a risk that a lot of that staying within one core genre often faces. But they're bringing in just enough elements from other genres, just enough stylistic details from other styles, to make each song stand on its own while working as part of the whole. So that is very, very nice. They managed to bring variety in, without having to give up a signature sound for the album. And that works very, very well here. Now, I did think that the singles, Sunrise and Memoria, were a lot stronger than the rest of the album. Now, there were a lot of good songs on here, but Sunrise and Memoria just stand so far above the rest for me. They are so far above the rest. Now, I do think that Memoria and the Sunrise instrumental don't really feel like they belong to me. I don't consider them part of the core album. Those, to me, feel like bonus tracks, and that's how I choose to look at them, because Memoria is a previously released song that they just re-recorded, and Sunrise is an instrumental version of the song that's already on the album. So when I'm talking about the album, I'm very much talking about Sunrise to Love Oh Love. So that is the album for me. And that, because I feel like I have to give a point rating, because otherwise it's not really a review. I would give this album a 7 out of 10. Now, that might sound a bit low, but I'm really grading from 1 to 10. I'm not, a lot of reviewers are giving scores out of 10, but they really only use 7 to 10, and then 7 means bad, 10 means great. No, I use the whole spectrum. So for me, 5 is an average album, 7 is a good album, 8 is a great album, 9 is a fantastic album, and 10 is so good that you'll probably never even see me use it. So this is a good album. I did have some songs that I didn't really enjoy in here, so that's why it's a 7 and not an 8. I did feel like some of these songs could have gone just a tiny bit further with the more unique elements here. All of them were good, but very few of them really pushed the envelope in far as creating like an interesting pop song. They all are good pop songs, and they all have just enough interesting and unique stuff going on to really keep me engaged. But aside from Sunrise and Memoria, none of these songs really made me go, oh my god, this is incredible, this is so interesting. So 2 really fantastic songs, and then a lot of good ones, and 1 or 2 that didn't really do it for me. So that's why it's a 7 out of 10 for me. And it's just, it flows very well. It clearly has a concept, because even looking at the album cover here, it just represents what this album is so well. Them in the sunlight, with these plain white outfits, these very pure outfits, very simple natural makeup, simple natural hair, sitting on the grass, and then those beautiful pastel colors around with the bit of the gold. That represents what this album sounds like perfectly. So you can tell, the people making this album, both this group and their composers and their arrangers and their producers, everyone involved, their management, they really thought about this album. They thought about creating something that stands as a bigger whole. It's better as a whole than the sum of its parts, and that is the sign of a good album. And ultimately, I'm very happy that I listened to this. And I'm definitely a fan of this group now. I'm definitely a fan. I will listen to more of their stuff, I will react to more of their stuff, and that is going to be my review. If you're still watching after almost 40 minutes, wow, you're dedicated. Do let me know your opinion. I hope my thoughts make sense and that I went into enough detail here. I really try to be fair and to give everything a fair chance, and I think a 7 out of 10, that is a legitimately good album. A few songs I didn't really like, but just an all-around good album. I really enjoyed this. Leave likes, leave comments if you enjoyed this. Subscribe if you want more. I do reactions all the time. I'm trying to do more reviews as well. I don't only do K-pop, but I'm mainly focusing on K-pop right now. And do let me know which other albums, not only GFRIEND, not only K-pop, just in general, that I should react to, that I should review. Do tell me which music videos, live performances, artists to react to. And I upload at least 1 video, often 2 or 3 videos every single day, so make sure to subscribe.